Okay, we'll be starting recording in the next couple of seconds. Well, there was some big news on Friday. Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Group, or perhaps you should just tell us exactly. I always get it wrong. It's Cape Independence Group, Cape Independence Movement. How do you actually describe yourselves, Phil?
Yeah, so the CIAG is probably the Independence Advocacy Group, but that's quite a mouthful. So we normally abbreviate it to the CIAG, because there's a number of groups working towards Cape Independence, and most of them have got Cape Independence in the name. So yeah, the CIAG.
And let's maybe just recap a little. When we spoke last week, you were explaining that you were in the process now of talking to the major political party in the Western Cape, that's the Democratic Alliance, to ask whether or not they would support a referendum. How did that meeting go?
Yeah, good. Well, we asked all of the political parties, to be fair. So we were producing an election guide for independent supporters, and as part of producing that guide, we contacted all of the major political parties and asked them the answer on two questions. Do they support Cape independence? And regardless of whether they support it or not, are they willing to allow the people of the Western Cape, or would they support the people of the Western Cape being consulted by a form of a referendum to determine whether they wanted Cape independence? And obviously, given the political circumstances of the Western Cape, the DA is the party of provincial government with the most critical one, and the DA, along with 7 other parties, confirmed that they were now willing to support a referendum on Cape independence, even though actually the DA at this point in time don't support Cape.
What was the meeting like with the Democratic Alliance? Who exactly did you see?
Look, so I think probably in terms of what happened at the meeting, probably isn't for us to tell. I think if I'm fair, I mean, but I mean, we engage with, we're a political lobby group first and foremost, with as many of the political parties as we can in the Western Cape. That includes most of them, and we have relatively regular contact with the DA, and this formed a part of that process. This wasn't a single conversation. This is part of discussions that have been going on for some time, and the DA themselves have in the press. I mean, clearly there's 1.4 million estimated voters in the Western Cape who support Cape independence. More than that, who support a referendum. The majority of the DA's own voters both support Cape independence and a referendum. The Cape independence movement would engage with the DA on a fairly regular basis, and we do.
So you're not going to tell me who you met with?
I mean, look, I think from our point of view, we're 100. I personally was involved in that discussion. We've made a public statement that we absolutely stand by. We've reached this agreement with the DA. I think if they want to declare details of what was said, I think that's their prerogative. What we wanted to be absolutely sure was that there was going to be, they were willing to support a referendum with our supporters, and we are 100% confident that we now that's the arrangement with the DA, and we've communicated that to our supporters, and we absolutely stand by that.
I guess the reason for that question is that you've come such a long way in such a short period of time that, and given the DA's official stance of not supporting Cape independence, it seems a little unreal that they now are, or at least allowing the people of the Cape to make that decision.
Yeah, so look, so I think it's an interesting one, and I think that I think it's a good question that you asked, actually, because I think our perspective would be something other than that, and I think people have in some ways been taken unawares by this, and therefore perhaps are struggling to find the context. But actually, the DA since 2016 have been heavily pushing the devolution of. That in the 2019 manifesto, that they pushed even more significantly for devolution of powers to the Western Cape. We have seen that they've led a debate in the National Council of Provinces 2 weeks ago on devolution. They have brought a private Parliament to fix the referendum legislation. So I think, when you put all of those things into context, it's absolutely clear that the DA want to devolve powers and significant powers to the Western Cape. Whilst they still want to try and save South Africa and therefore haven't come as far as us who are pushing for outright independence, clearly, those principles are very, very compatible. I think this is a logical conclusion, and I think it would be quite extraordinary for the DA to support devolution of power to the Western Cape, to fix the referendum legislation so they could consult with the people of the Western Cape, and then have a question such as independence, where 58% of people in the province and 65% of their own vote Cape Independence, and they do all of this and then not give a referendum on Cape Independence. I think that would be far more remarkable. So I think this really should be entirely expected of people. I just think it's that people for so long have written Cape Independence off as impossible and a joke, and that all of a sudden we're here. Are sort of more intimately involved. This has just been a very, very logical process, growing support, more and more parties coming in, more and more organizations coming in. I think that really this shouldn't have support anybody who's up to speed, but for those who've kind of sat on the sidelines and just dismissed it as and sort of a pipe dream, then this probably is the rude awakening, that this is the sort of point where you realize, hang on a second, a referendum on Cape Independence is going to take place. If you've always thought this is a pipe dream, that probably does come as quite a shock to your system.
Phil, the research that you did has been criticized. Well, I suppose not criticized, but in ignorance, people are saying, but who did you talk to? How scientific is the research that 58% of people in the Cape would like a referendum?
Sure. And I think this all forms a part of the counter narrative. I mean, for certain people, unthinkable. They can't imagine that it would do it. So therefore, anything that we do as an organization is going to be criticized and scrutinized, and that's fine. You don't mind that. You expect to be scrutinized. As an organization, we are really fact-based. We really don't ever make outrageous claims. Silly stories about what we do. It was independent research. Exercise. We've done it twice, and we've published the summaries of the results. So I think nobody that really understands how polling is criticizing this. The DA certainly aren't criticizing this. They certainly recognize the validity of the results. People shouting from the sidelines who just don't want this to be true, and that's particularly what we see. And there's not much we can do about that. We can produce the thing. We can say, listen, this was the methodology. This was the company that did it. This was the results. If people choose to dismiss that point of view, the key thing for us and actually our raison d'etre in the first instance, our first obstacle as an organization was to obtain a referendum on Cape Independence, and we've obtained that now, or we've now put ourselves in a situation where that now is a certainty, and therefore we're very, very happy and looked at celebrate with us. For those that don't want to celebrate with us and don't want to believe it, then obviously that's their prerogative. We don't have to convince everybody. We just have to wait for the referendum, and obviously our focus will then switch on to other things, part of which will be winning the referendum. And then obviously there's going now between this announcement, where we've been pushing for a referendum, and now, whereas an organisation, our focus will now change from winning a referendum to preparing the Western Cape for the referendum, if you like.
When is it likely to be held?
Well, so there's so many ways you can only speculate, because nobody knows what's going to happen in terms of the referendum or the Electoral Commission Amendment Act, which the DA are bringing before Parliament. Nobody knows what the passage of that bill is going to be. I'm told the DA that they expect it to be at the committee stage in November, and I think therefore happens. We know there's overwhelming support in Parliament in terms of public comments, an extraordinarily large amount of public comments. you know, we don't at this point in time know how the ANC are going to react to that bill, and we obviously saw comments over the weekend or Friday, I think, from the ex-finance minister Tito Mboweni, who weighed in on this on Twitter, which caused quite a bit of a stir, and that did get a very positive and robust response from the DA. I think the most noteworthy comment was Helen Zille's comment that basically said, well, look, you know, if we've got people who aren't voting for the DA, then actually, that they aren't voting for the DA, and there's a failing state, that actually there is a responsibility for those people to sort of rescue themselves and not allow themselves to go down with the ship. So I mean, all of that was positive, but I mean, what we don't know is how these two factors are going to, whether this goes through Parliament fairly easily, or whether actually it doesn't. We'll determine that. And of course, we now know that AfriForum have weighed that they intend to bring a constitutional court application to force Parliament to pass a bill, which effectively, I guess, will end up being this bill. But 18 months is probably what I expect. We're kind of expecting a referendum in about 18 months' time, but that really is sort of educated guesswork on our side rather than some specific timetable that we have that nobody else has.
Our species has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, and yet we seem to think that this brief period that we spend on Earth is all there is. I'm very interested in history because it does give us a better insight into this. For how long was the Cape independent previously, or certainly not part of South Africa? We know it's been part of South Africa since 1910, from the Union in 1910, but was it always separate ahead of that?
So look, I'm really not a historian, so I'm the wrong person to ask. I know bits of the history, but I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. But certainly there was a Cape province, and one of the things that's very interesting is that the Cape colony was always certainly then was the bastion of liberalism, and one of the things that I always find very interesting and quite inspiring was that just ahead of 1910 there was a thing called the Schreiner Commission, and the Western Cape sent a commission to the UK to plead for non-racialism, and that was made up of white, coloured, and black delegates. And fun enough, you know, I think I press conference when we released the most recent polling results, and actually we, you know, in many ways it was a real honor, that press conference, and actually we had people, all from members from the executive committee of the CIAG, but we had a black member, a white member, and a coloured member, and actually in many ways it felt like we've come full circle to the Schreiner Commission. We're now pleading with South Africa for a non-racial Western Cape, and we're pleading it as black Cape citizens and coloured Cape citizens and white Cape citizens, and we're pleading for the same thing all over again after 110 years of centralisation, which has just seen the subrogation and oppression of some parts of society, whether it's been by the colonial powers initially, whether it's been by the national government, the national party government, or whether it's now by the ANC. Centralism has just been a complete disaster specifically for the people of the Western Cape. And here we are again, a multiracial organisation, the CIAG, and our colleagues pleading for a non-racial based upon the democratic will of the South African Cape constitutions, and people obviously try to misrepresent our movement all the time, but that's the reality. Movement calling for on behalf of all of the races of people who live there.